But right now, we want to go right to the telephone lines. We have Donald Trump, the Republican frontrunner. Merry Christmas. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Did you have a nice Christmas, by the way?
Yeah, it is. It was a great Christmas. It was really interesting, and it was beautiful. I love Christmas.
Well, best wishes to you and your family. We want to get right to politics. There's a CNN poll out. Has you topping the field, 39%. Your closest competitor is Republican Senator Ted Cruz at 18%. And then we see you on social media over the last few days sending what really looks like a warning shot to both Bill and Hillary Clinton, saying and tweeting at one point, be careful. You said, Hillary, when you complain about a, quote, penchant for sexism, that was a charge she started it and leveled at you. Who are you referring to? I have great respect for women. Be careful. My question is, number one, are you already looking ahead to the general election with some of these poll numbers? And number two, do you really think Bill Clinton is fair game in this race?
Well, to answer number two, yeah, I think he is fair game because his presidency was really considered to be very troubled, to put it mildly, because of all of the things that she's talking to me about. I mean, she's mentioning sexism. I actually turned her exact words. I don't know if you saw the following tweet, but I turned her exact words against her from that standpoint. And she's got to be careful. You know, it's got to be fair. And we all have to fight fairly, and we have to fight, you know, for the good of the country, for the good of the people, for the good of everybody. But we have to fight fairly. And she's playing the woman's card, and it's like, give me a break. And I've had so many women come up to me say, you've got to keep her out. She is just terrible. She's playing that woman's card left and right, and women are more upset about it than anybody else, including most men.
So you're looking ahead to the general election then. You think you're so far ahead in the GOP nomination battle, you're ready to take Hillary Clinton on head on?
No, I don't feel that I'm so far ahead. I'm doing well, but I never feel I'm so far ahead. I could be in a baseball game and be 10 runs up in the ninth inning, and I wouldn't feel I'm so far ahead. I never feel that. I feel that, you know, I'm against very capable people, and there were a lot, and there still are a lot. I guess a number have dropped out, but we were at 17 when this whole journey, this very beautiful journey started. And it's certainly been interesting for me because I've never done it before. I'm self-funding my own campaign, as you know, Ed. And you know, it's been very interesting to me to see. I'm dealing against a lot of very capable people, so I never consider it to be over. As Yogi said, it's not over until it's over, right?
That's right, the great Yogi Berra.
Mr. Trump, you mentioned the second tweet, which we'll put on the screen for our viewers to read. You tweeted on Saturday, Hillary Clinton has announced that she's letting her husband out to campaign, but he's demonstrated a penchant for sexism, so inappropriate. And a lot of conventional wisdom says that, well, Bill Clinton was popular, is popular amongst some. Do you sense a vulnerability there that other people in the mainstream media don't see?
Well, you know, the penchant for sexism was exactly her words, and I just turned them, and I thought it was fine. And, yeah, I think that Bill Clinton was, you know, turned out to be a liability against Obama when they ran against each other, and I guess it was '08. But he was absolutely, you know, I mean, you look at that whole campaign, was a mess. And he said things that were very, very problematic and troublesome. And so, you know, certainly Bill Clinton is not going to be the end-all in the campaign, and he'll come under attack, not just from me. He'll be coming under attack from many other people, including, I mean, Bernie Sanders. I watched him the other day during the debate. He practically rolled over. I've never seen a guy like this. He gave up the emails, and the last half of the debate, all he was doing was praising Hillary Clinton. I don't know how you win like that, but maybe he has a different way of campaigning, and, you know, I don't think it's going to be Bernie Sanders. Personally, I'd rather run against Hillary. I actually would rather run against Hillary than Bernie Sanders. I'm more prepared to run against Hillary because I've been thinking about that. I don't think Bernie's going to win. I think he gave it up when he gave her a pass on the emails, where she's right now under federal investigation. We'll have to see what happens. I have a feeling that investigation will go nowhere because the Democrats won't allow it to go anywhere, which is disgraceful.
Mr. Trump, I would like to get your reaction to something. I think I already know what the reaction is going to be, though. A group called America's Voice, they're sort of a pro-immigrant group. They're very unhappy with a report that the Department of Homeland Security is going to be going on raids, basically deporting families who surge across the border. They say, in part, it's essentially due to you. They're blaming this on you, or at least they're kind of bringing you into the mix. You have doubled down, not surprisingly, and you say, yeah, I mean, this is part of me. Elaborate a little bit on this.
Well, Juliet, we either have a country or we don't. And you have people, many, many millions of people, not only pouring into the country, but you have people here. and lots of bad things are happening, and you've been, seeing it with the crime, and you've been seeing it with others. But you also, and we don't talk about it that much, economically it's very bad because they're taking jobs of Americans, and we have to do something about it. But either we have a border, and I'm the one that said we have to have a border, we have to have a wall. It's got to be a great wall. It's got to really stop people and stop drugs and stop all this other stuff that's coming in, really hurting. I mean, if you look at what's going on with the drug problem, where the drugs are pouring in through the southern border, and they're infesting Chicago and parts of New England, certainly New Hampshire with heroin is a disaster what's going on up there. It's one of their big problems. Every time I go to New Hampshire, what they really want to talk about first on the list is the tremendous heroin problem they have. And, we're going to have a wall, and we're going to have a border, and we're going to have a country again.
Mr. Trump, immigration is one of the issues that's animated the debates. The next one is on Fox Business Network on January 14th, very early in the new year. You've been critical of Rand Paul and some of the others sort of at the bottom. The FBN has put out criteria, and Rand Paul says he will not take part in a second-tier debate. Does the field need to be winnowed at this point? Do you think Fox and other news networks have to winnow this down to a handful of candidates instead of, double debates, if you will? And if so, what do you think is the field? You and who else?
Well, I do think it'll be whittled down. I agree with Rand Paul. I wouldn't want to do that either. I wouldn't want to go up there. I mean, he's a United States senator, and, they call it all different names. They call it the child stage and the children's stage and, lots of very demeaning names. Now, I guess some things come out of it, but so far not much has come out of it. And I think that, frankly, it's very demeaning for a United States senator to be on a secondary stage, especially when he was really one of the front runners at the very beginning. I mean, I remember when I first entered the race, Rand Paul was close to leading the race, and now he's on that. So I would say that he is 100% right in not partaking in that.
And so you think it should be winnowed. So what is the field?
Oh, absolutely. I think
field?
it should be. Well, ideally, it should be down to 4 or 5 candidates. I don't want to really name the candidates because I think that would be inappropriate. But it should be down to 4 or 5 candidates, and we should be able to speak for longer periods. It was sort of interesting in the last debate. They said, okay, you have 30 seconds to talk about the economy, right? Or you have 30 seconds to talk about illegal immigration, Mr. Trump. And I'm saying to myself, wow, that's not much. It would be better to – I do like the shorter sound bites, but it would be better if we could have a longer period of time to discuss these very important issues for our country.
And where do you think you are in Iowa right now? Because Ted Cruz believes he's on a surge and that he might capture Iowa and then it would put more pressure on you to win New Hampshire, where, by the way, you'll be campaigning the next couple of days.
Right. I'm up in New Hampshire. We're doing great there. We're doing great in Iowa. Poll just came out in Iowa where I'm 2 points up, as you saw yesterday. I think I'm doing really well in Iowa. I think we're going to have a lot of people voting maybe than caucusing that never did it before. And I think we've got a lot. All I know is every time I make a speech, we have crowds that are many, many, many times bigger than anybody else. And, I've been hearing the commentators, including your network, where the question is, will those people come out and actually vote? I think they will, but, you don't know. Look, I have a very good bond and relationship to the people of Iowa. I've done great with the Tea Party. I've done really, really great with the evangelicals. And, you see the numbers. And Ted and I are pretty close in terms of the polling, but I think we're going to have a lot of people that go out. I hope to win Iowa. It would be very easy for me to say, oh, well, if I come in second or third, that would be wonderful, but I don't want to say that. I'd like to win Iowa, and then I'd like to win New Hampshire, where I have a very substantial lead, and then in South Carolina, we have likewise a very, very substantial lead, and I think we're going to do great in Nevada. We're going to do great with the SEC, so we'll have to see what happens, but I can only tell you one thing for sure. It's going to be interesting.
No, it already has been. We want to ask you to stick around. I think you have agreed to do that. So if you wouldn't mind, just stay with us through the commercial break. We want to know what your New Year's resolution is. I can only imagine. I can't wait. Think about that.
Make America great again, maybe? Is
that could be one of them. But let's do an obscure one.
That's about as good as it gets.
Something that's not predictable. Something that's...
To presidential politics. Just a little more than a month now to the first in the nation voting in Iowa. Just 8 years ago, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee won the GOP caucuses there. But it's a different story this time around. Huckabee is currently polling 8th in the state at only 2.3%, according to the latest Real Clear Politics average. And this week, he said he will likely end his campaign if he does not finish in the top 3. Governor Huckabee joins me now from Little Rock, Arkansas. Governor, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks, Doug. Great to be back with you.
Let me ask you, it's incumbent upon me to ask you right off the bat, you got any announcement to make right now?
Of course not. Look, not one person in all of America has even voted. I get so amazed that people act like that this is all settled. It's never settled this far out. I mean, I go back to the Iowa caucuses, both Democrat and Republican. John Kerry won when he wasn't supposed to. Barack Obama won when he wasn't supposed to. I won, and nobody thought that was going to happen. Rick Santorum won. He was in 7th place, or 6th place out of 7 candidates, 5 days out from the caucuses. So everybody wants to base it on polls that have polled 200 or 300 people. Why don't we wait till the voters make the decision? Then we'll have a better picture of where this is all headed.
In Iowa, perhaps more than in any other state, it depends on ground game. How is your ground game in Iowa?
It's terrific. We've spent more time there than anybody. We have organizations in all 99 counties. We have more named chairmen and co-chairmen and people stretched out to the precinct levels. We did a phone survey of 5,000 people in Iowa. And, Doug, what we found was 75% of the people in Iowa haven't made up their minds yet. And 58% said they're not even leaning one way or the other. So this idea that something is all sewed up or fixed, I've been in that state enough to know it's just not quite like that yet.
And, Governor, if you're going to stay in it until the caucuses get underway, you got to play hardball. That's the name of the game. It ain't beanbag, as they say. And your super PAC that has been closely aligned with you has begun running an advertisement criticizing Senator Ted Cruz. Let's take a look at that.
Listen to Cruz raise money in New York City from liberals who don't share our conservative Iowa values.
So would you say it's like a top 3 priority for you, fighting gay marriage, or no?
Now, Governor, you have been accused of selectively and deceptively editing what Cruz said at that private fundraiser in New York last summer. The Washington Post's The Fix pointed out that after Cruz said no in that comment, he quickly expanded on the point. Quote, no, I would say defending the Constitution is a top priority, and that cuts across the whole spectrum, whether it's defending the First Amendment, defending religious liberty, stopping courts from making public policy issues that are left to the people. And he said, I also think that the 10th Amendment to the Constitution cuts across a lot of these issues. Isn't that selective editing there, sir?
No, not at all. And there was nothing selective. There was nothing deceptive. The point is that in Iowa, he's made a major point, and he's pitched to evangelicals as a person who is utterly authentic. He's going to fight for religious liberty. He's going to protect the right of people to disagree with decisions on same-sex marriage. But that's not what you heard in that Manhattan fundraiser. And that's the only thing that I have pointed out. Obviously, it had nothing to do with the ad because, as you well know, Doug, candidates cannot communicate even in any way, can't even have a conversation with people who run a super PAC. So there is no coordination or communication there. But it's just a matter of listening to the transcript and recognizing that it's not a big issue when he's in Manhattan, but it is a much bigger issue in Iowa. Look, we all, I think, are looking for people who are consistent. And consistent means that you say the same thing regardless of where you are geographically, and that you don't take a different position or a slightly nuanced position because it would help you or hurt you with Manhattan fundraisers and people who are the big dollar donors in what I call the Washington to Wall Street axis of power.
Governor, I think in the bigger picture, though, this kind of intra-party GOP bashing harkens back to the 2012 campaign when we had somewhat the same dynamic, including Mitt Romney, who were, all the candidates were spending their war chests on attacking each other while President Obama was out building his grassroots campaign, spending his money on that. The Los Angeles Times at that time said, and I quote, an examination of how the two campaigns have spent their money in the last year starkly illustrates the huge advantage Obama will have. Spared a primary opponent, the president's re-election campaign by the end of February had pumped nearly $79 million into laying the groundwork for an ambitious, tech-savvy field effort. Are there similar liabilities for the GOP this time around?
Well, no, and Doug, I think there's a big difference between showing some legitimate contrast and bashing. I don't think anybody in the GOP so much as bashed another candidate. Maybe there's been a little bit here and there, but it certainly hasn't been by me. And I don't think that anything I've said has been going after a candidate. It's really pointing out that for those people for whom issues like the sanctity of life and the sanctity of marriage are critical, important, non-negotiables, then I think that they, certainly need to understand where candidates stand and make sure that they have a candidate who stands the same wherever he is and doesn't adjust according to the geography of place.
As you well know, Donald Trump is not the front runner in Iowa, but in many nationwide polls, he is just pulling ahead of the pack, and he does this despite this sexual slang that he used to describe Hillary's loss in 2008. Yet he remains atop all these nationwide polls despite numerous gaffes. What explains, in your mind, his imperviousness to falling?
The amount of attention that guys like Fox News and everybody else gives him. I mean, my gosh, in the days after he made the comment about Muslims entering the country, Donald Trump got 25 times more media attention on television than all other GOP candidates combined. And so it's very difficult. Some of us are saying things that are substantive. For example, when I'm talking about getting the wages up for the bottom 90% of the workers who have had stagnant wages for 40 years, or if I talk about the merits of the fair tax, how we can compete in manufacturing, or if I focus on getting the veterans system cleaned up by making members of Congress get their health care as well as from their families from the VA system until they clean it up. You know, it's not that all of America is hearing that because they're hearing what Donald Trump said.
Well, you know as well that Fox News has spent a lot of time criticizing Donald Trump's comments, and when we do so, we hear it from his followers, no doubt. Does his popularity have anything to do with just the generalized coarsening of the culture?
It's not so much the coarsening, it's the anger, the seething rage of the electorate right now. People are so mad. And, Doug, I can understand a lot of it. They feel like that this government is completely oblivious to protecting them. They go through metal detectors and they take their shoes off to get on the plane to go see Grandma at Christmas. And yet, you know, here comes a terrorist coming in who passes all kinds of background checks and goes and shoots up a Christmas party after her husband has sat there and had lunch with their fellow employees. People see that and they're angry. They're angry at the fact that there's a handful of people who get richer and richer. A lot of people in this country work harder and harder. They got nothing to show for it. There is frustration. They're frustrated when they watch Republicans pass a huge multi-trillion-dollar spending bill that doesn't defund Planned Parenthood, that welcomes Syrian refugees, that doesn't do a thing about Obamacare, basically gives the Democrats everything they want, gives the Republicans nothing. So what I'm seeing is that people are just so incredibly angry, and understandably so.
Many long-time respected political analysts say that Mr. Trump cannot win a general election, and here's why. Larry Sabato from the University of Virginia.
Trump cannot appeal to swing voters in the key states like Ohio and Florida, Virginia, Nevada, the other swing states. And the swing states are where the election is.
Will he become the nominee, and will you support him if he becomes the nominee?
If he's the nominee, of course I'll support him. I mean, that's what we've all pledged to do. I'm a little frustrated that the Republican Party made such a big deal of insisting that Donald Trump be loyal to the party. Well, look, that goes both ways. The party better be loyal to whoever the nominee is, be it me, be it Donald Trump, and that has to work that way. Otherwise, we have no system, nothing at all. But here's one question, Doug. All these guys who say Trump can't be the nominee, if they're so smart, how come none of them predicted that he would be on top of things right now? How come none of them predicted who would be leading, who would be trailing? How come none of them got it right so far? And if they're so wrong about that, why on earth should anybody in America believe them about who's going to be the nominee and who isn't?
And that's your ticket to the Iowa caucuses, I assume, right?
Why not?
All right. Governor Huckabee, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, and happy holidays to you.
Thank you, Doug. Great to be with you.
A look outside the Beltway at Times Square, where the 2016 sign has arrived ahead of the upcoming New Year's Eve celebration. Security certainly on the minds of tourists and residents alike in the city that's been on high alert since last month's terror attack in Paris. To discuss, let's bring in Congressman Peter King, a member of the House Homeland Security Committee. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Doug.
I'd like to get your reaction to some new news that's broken just in the past 24 hours or so. Yesterday, a purported audio tape recording from the ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was released, in which he says that neither airstrikes by Russia nor by the U.S.-led coalition in Syria and Iraq has done much damage to his terrorist organization. What do you make of it?
Well, I would expect al-Baghdadi to say that. We've had some impact But unfortunately, overall, he's probably right that after 16 months of air attacks by the U.S., it's had really minimal impact on ISIS, considering how long those attacks have been going on. And as far as the Russians, they're focusing most of their attacks on the Syrian resistance as opposed to ISIS. So ISIS is strong. ISIS is stronger, I believe, than it was 16 months ago. They certainly have a larger landmass under their control. They're not just in Iraq and Syria are they significant, but also they're making great inroads in Afghanistan. And as we know, they also do intend to attack the United States. I'd say in the last several months, it's become clear that they do want to launch an attack on the U.S.
And another item in the news, just last Friday, the TSA announced that it is now going to require full body scans for some traveling passengers. Bruce Anderson of the TSA said, quote, some passengers will be required to undergo full body screening if warranted by security considerations in order to safeguard transportation security. He said this will occur in a very limited number of circumstances where enhanced screening is required. What do you infer from this change in procedure?
Well, I do believe it is only going to be a very limited number of people, but there will be reasons for it. There will be security reasons why certain people will be chosen for this and required to go through it. I can't go into those reasons now, but there are going to be definite reasons why. And it also, it's really, Doug, it's related to two events. One, the fact is that there have been a series of Inspector General inspections which have shown that TSA, too much has gotten through. That the inspections have not been effective enough, and that's why you're going to see this extra level of security directed against certain people. So this, you add to that,
could we infer then that this is related to the failure of those TSA testing in the past, or is it related perhaps to some evidence uncovered in recent terrorist attacks, San Bernardino or Paris?
Well, I would say it's both. The fact is that the past inspections have not been effective enough, and secondly, the fact that there's no doubt that ISIS is planning increased attacks against the U.S. So that's why this is going to be done. I just wish, though, the TSA, and I think Admiral Neffinger is doing a good job, but I wish they would lay the groundwork more for what they're doing, because I think there's going to be a reaction against this. People are going to think that it's going to cause tremendous delays at the airport. You know, there are sound reasons why this is being done, and I hope the TSA, when they do roll it out, they do it in the least intrusive way possible, but it is going to be necessary. We do live in a very, very dangerous world, and people have to realize that.
Turning to another issue now, the crossing of illegal immigrants from across the southern border. The DHS, I should say, said in the past 2 months the number of families crossing the southern border illegally has risen sharply compared with the same period last year. Just over 12,500 families were apprehended in October and November, compared to 4,500 during the same 2 months in 2014. What is causing this uptick in border crossings?
Yeah, you know, this is a story that really hasn't been covered that much. Again, I'm not certain why, but it is the fact. They are crossing. And, Doug, this is really the case of almost the politics of false compassion. So I remember when those unattended minors were coming, unaccompanied minors were coming across the border back in the summer of 2014. And, you know, your hearts have to go out to them. But the fact is the ones who have suffered the most are the people living in the lower income communities here in the United States. That's where those kids go, and they're not ready for those schools. Many of them come with criminal backgrounds. For instance, I know here in Long Island, talking to the police, there's the numbers of MS-13 gang incidents have risen dramatically because of a number of these kids coming in. Again, it's not their fault. They come from a very violent background, many of them, and so they're not prepared educationally, they're not prepared socially, and they're put in, and again, it's not going to be white people, you know, living on the east side of Manhattan. They're going to be going into, again, underprivileged communities having a tough time already, and now on top of that, they have this added burden of having these kids coming in. So again, you feel bad for the kids, but the ones suffering the most are the people living here trying to survive under you know, very tough conditions.
Congressman, I want to turn again to terrorism on the home front. You have said, somewhat controversially, that we need better surveillance of mosques in the United States. Yeah. Quoting you, the only way you're going to find out this in advance is to do the same type of 24/7 surveillance that was done in the Italian-American communities when they were going after the mob, mafia, and the Irish communities when they're going after the Westies. You look where the terror threat is going to come from, and right now it is going to come from the Muslim community. I can hear the cries of civil libertarians and constitutionalists right now, Congressman.
Yeah, listen, they can cry all they want. The fact is that's where the threat is coming from. And we can say that 98, 99% of Muslims in this country are good people. I'm actually swearing in the first elected Muslim on Long Island to office. She's a good friend of mine. So this is nothing against Muslims. But the fact is that is where the threat is coming from. And we're kidding ourselves. We have this blind political correctness which makes no sense. For instance, in Boston, with the Boston Marathon bombing, you had the oldest Tsarnaev brother. He was put out of a mosque because of his radical thoughts and his radical statements made in that mosque. But nobody in the mosque ever told the police. Nobody ever told the FBI. And if they had known that in advance, you combine that with the fact that the Russians had already told us to be on the lookout for him, we could have prevented possibly the Boston Marathon bombing. We've had a number of Muslims from Long Island, where I live, who have gone overseas fighting with Al-Qaeda, and you find out they had been in mosques and they had spoken very radically, but nobody in those mosques ever told the police. So in almost all the cases you find that
gets to a point I wanted to ask you about next. Having been privy to classified briefings and intelligence matter, do you know of specific cases where people within the Muslim community have been reticent to, for lack of a better term, to rat out suspected terrorists, or for lack of a better term, people who see something, say something, or are reticent to do that?
Yeah, I would say definitely more often than not. And again, I'm giving examples right now on Long Island here, where you've had people in mosques who have spoken radically, who spoke of their intentions to be involved in jihad. It was never told to the police, never told to the police at all. And when you talk to police off the record, they will tell you that they get very little cooperation from within the leaders of the Muslim community. There was one imam in New York, going back to the days of the attempted subway bombing, there was one imam that the police did trust. And when they heard that the liquid explosive bomber was coming to New York and they wanted to find who else was involved with him, they went to that imam, asked him for some help. The first thing he did was tip off the father of the bomber. He was the one guy they trusted, and he tipped off the enemy, a guy who was coming to New York to kill thousands of New Yorkers.
Real quickly, Congressman, we're almost out of time. What kind of limits are being placed on U.S. investigative agencies that prevents them from infiltrating these mosques or pursuing sources that they know could be beneficial?
Basically, Justice Department guidelines make it very difficult. Local police, and again, in New York, the NYPD did a phenomenal job. The Civil Liberties Union, the New York Times have tried to cut back on that. Mayor de Blasio, I think, made too many concessions. They're still doing a great job, don't get me wrong, but they're doing it in spite of a lot of the restraints that you sort of try to put on them. But as far as the feds, they are very limited. They basically cannot be infiltrating mosques. I think it has to be done.
Congressman King, thank you very much.